how are we going to grow brand awareness? It was all about narrative change. So it was big, massive stands and big awareness, trying to make sure that everyone could see us. Whereas at Bloom, it's much more focused and tailored.
But actually, when you start seeing the stories that are being told there and how those stories are then interpreted in a garden to tell that story is fascinating.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing. I'm your host, Conor Byrne. And of course, this is the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Don't forget to rate or review the episode wherever you are tuning in. It really does help us reach an engaged community of marketers just like you. So today's episode is a bit of a blooming special one. That's the pun and the terrible gag is going to make sense in just a moment. Last year I was at Bord Bia Bloom for the first time, and I honestly was taken aback by the event, what it was, and how it was really different to my perceptions. It's a celebration of Irish horticulture, creativity, sustainability and food culture. So I'm delighted to be partnering with Bord Bia Bloom on today's episode as we explore how brands can look at their marketing mix and explore ways to engage with audience in meaningful and interactive ways through sponsorships. So I'm going to be discussing why brands are increasingly aligning themselves with sponsorship opportunities like Bloom to deepen their connection with the consumers, fostering community engagement and helping to grow their brand presence in meaningful and tangible ways. So whether you are agency side, working in-house or simply passionate about marketing, this episode is packed with insights into how Bord Bia Bloom has become more than just a garden show. It is the essential touch point for brands looking to cultivate real world relationships. And I am joined by an amazing panel of experts to talk not just about Bord Bia Bloom, but about sponsorship and how that is fitting into their overall marketing mix. So let's meet our panel and guests today. And that's what I call marketing. First of all, beside me is Trevor Koen. Did I get that right?
You did.
Well, I got the Irish version
my
of
adopted version, yeah.
And Trevor is head of marketing and digital at Certa. If you're watching, the big blue hoodie was a dead giveaway. Next up is Ciara O'Grady, and Ciara is senior consultant at Onsite. Now, I know Ciara really well. Myself and Ciara actually work together at the National Children's Hospital. So Ciara's going to bring her wealth of experience into today's conversation. Ciara, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here. Thank you, Conor.
And finally, we have Trevor Hunt. They made it really easy for me today with Trevor and Trevor. So Trevor, thanks a million for joining me. Trevor is head of marketing at Citroen for the last 2 years. Trevor, thanks a million for joining me.
You're very welcome, Conor. Great to be here.
Brilliant. Well, listen, we've so much that we want to chat today when it comes to the world of sponsorship. But I've done a bit of introduction to you all, but I'd just love to kind of get a bit of a, maybe, your own introduction and kind of your path to your current role. Trevor, I will start with you first.
Been in the world of marketing for around 15 years now, 12 of which have been in Ireland. So moved here in 2012 and worked across a variety of sectors, both in high growth startups into large corporates, FTSE 100 businesses, Fortune 500 businesses. And that's been on both the agency and client side, which is where I am now on the client side with Certa. It's been an enjoyable 12 years here so far, and we're only getting started, I think. And look, Certa, we have a fantastic marketing team. We work fairly centrally across all divisions, and that's across customer growth, customer retention. Thankfully, we also cover brand and sponsorship, which is the main part that we're here to talk about.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, Certa is in what space?
A number of them. So Certa would be one of the leading fuel and energy brands in the country. We own a number of forecourts across the country. We have a booming renewables business across solar and renewable fuels. We're in the lubricant space as the Castrol distributor for the country. And then a variety of commercial fuels and commercial products as well. So there's a number of sectors that we work across.
That's a lot. And it's interesting maybe when we get into talking about sponsorship, how bringing all that together and how sponsorship helps play a role. Yeah. Ciara said we work together in a very different world, the non-profit world. But tell me a bit about your role in Onsite.
Yeah, so I joined Onsite 2 years ago. My experience of them before that was, as many people know, it was founded by John Traynor, our founder, almost 20 years ago at this stage. And I had experience of the work that Onsite did, both when I was with the Glen Eagle INEC Arena and also when I was with Bord Bia Energy. So just in terms of what drew me was just the measurability, the kind of like how you could measure the impact of a sponsorship and how as a brand it could be utilised, and then also as a rights holder how what you can use to communicate that to potential brands who may want to partner with you. So that was the appeal. So there's a research side of the business and an advisory side of the business, and yeah, it's just a really lovely mix, just in terms of like clients that are brands, also clients that are rights holders. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. So far away from where I met you years ago. I had just come back from New Zealand.
That's right.
And I signed up for like a 3-month contract, like an events contract. And I stayed in the hospital for 8.5 years.
Was it 8.5 years?
Yeah, it
wow.
was 8.5 years in the Children's Hospital in Tallaght. So just fundraising events. It was just phenomenal. But again, in terms of sponsorship point of view as well, just like the role of sponsorship there. And there were kind of things that I know now that I'm like, God, if we only knew that back then, because you tended to either like underserve or, not be able to communicate your worth and your value. Or there was other things that you overserved. Yeah. There was they're like, look, we just want to use a logo on a poster, and so it's just, so that was where we first met,
God, kind of forgotten. I'd even forgotten the contract bit. So anyway, let's not reminisce too much. Trevor, you moved from like the world of alcohol to cars. You didn't mix them, which is the right thing to do.
No, absolutely. So most of my career was with the drinks industry, predominantly with Diageo. So again, I got to work with John many years ago. I was Carlsberg brand manager, so with all the football sponsorships back then in 2006 that was. From there I went on to work on Smithwick's, which I think was probably, when I got that role in Diageo, my boss at the time said, this will be the best job you'll ever have, and he was right. I loved that brand. It was amazing to the people I got to meet, and working with Paul Smithwick's and rebranding it, moving it from the green to the burgundy. So that was the big thing back in 2009. And then got a chance to work on Artist Day, lots of different brands within Diageo, and the last 2 years on Citroen. So I've always loved cars. I think it was probably when I first came out of college, worked for Bro, actually, the white beer, and they gave me a 3-litre long wheelbase Land Cruiser, so straight out of college. So that's what started me into the drinks industry. Is like, the wheels were great. So come full circle now, and obviously working on a brand like Citroen with a lot of potential to grow and a big history there is great. So 2 years almost to the day.
Wow. Yeah. So Trevor, I have to ask you, have you brought the dweeb principles with you to Citroen?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the 5 eyes in there that you can apply to anything, and I suppose, look, in Diageo, it's the toolkit really that it's packaged up differently. A lot of different companies have the same principles, but they package it up very, very well, and then you can just apply it to any problem really and any issue that you have. So always very useful and learning from the best. So you can definitely apply it everywhere. And
they train people on it. They try to train the whole business on it.
So it's like, I remember it's sort of the Diageo way or no way. I remember one of the grads asked, well, what have we done to do it differently? And he says, well, you get another job.
Go somewhere
else. Simple as that. It works, and it was proven. So
But I'm going to ask you, pick up on one thing that you said, which was Carlsberg to Smithwick's, and you actually you preferred working on the Smithwick's brand. That's a bit surprising, maybe.
Yeah, there was actually Niall Tracy who said it to me. Worked at Budweiser at the time. He's portfolio at the moment, but Niall said to me he worked on Smithwick's, and he said this would be the best job he ever had. And it actually was, because I got to meet Paul Smithwick. His father sold a brewery in '66, and then when I did sort of a cross-agency briefing, he opened up his whole house. I brought all the agencies up to his house in Carrickmines. He took out all the documentation that he had of his great-great-grandfather Edmund Smithwick talking to Daniel O'Connell and repealing Catholic emancipation. All these letters, all this history, the whole, the wealth of history tied to that brand and tied to Ireland. So got to see all of that, got to meet the president, Mary McAleese, at a dinner party in his house, and it was just, it was incredible, really.
I want to talk a bit about kind of the marketing mix that you kind of have and are applying, because then kind of how sponsorship is fitting into it. Trevor, can you tell me just a bit about how you're approaching the marketing mix at Certa, and is it a mix of B2B and B2C?
It is, and it's quite a mixture as well, because we're also in that world of the kind of fuel and oil industry, which is what we were. We're obviously moving towards renewables at the moment, but that would have been a very much an old school industry. It was call centers, phone in, place your orders, do what you do, and we're transitioning all of that online and trying to bring it all across, and making strong ground there. So we do have a very, very digital focused mix when it comes to the channels. We don't do a huge amount of out of home, but what we do have is a massive network of depots, which are very much in the hearts of communities, and then it's very local. It's about, are you on the right lamppost in the town to be catching the right people? So there's that mix of really broad nationwide stuff, and very hard digital pushes to drive direct call to actions online, sign up, place your order, or submit a lead, mixed with that very local piece. So for us, the sponsorship side, it's very mixed as well. So we've got a few properties that we work on. We would have Bloom, where we're a sustainability partner there, and we sponsor the Sustainable Living Stage and do a lot there. We would also have the National Ploughing Championships that we do a bit of work with. So we do in that event space a fair bit. In terms of sport, we would be the title sponsor of the national women's cricket team. So it's a bit of a niche one. Everyone kind of double takes at me when you say it, but it's bigger than you think. But then because of that kind of local depot network as well, we do a massive amount of very small local club sponsorship. Okay. So we would be sponsoring around 45 clubs locally for kind of kids sponsorships, signage sponsorships, things like that. So, and then how do we bring all of those together? How do we get local clubs to events and cricket onto events and things like that? So it's a kind of broad mix, but the interesting thing is it's very early days for us, because Certa as a brand has only been in existence since September 2022. We were 8 different businesses that go back, Emo Oil, Campus Oil, a bunch of different brands, and we rebranded that under Certa in 2022, and sponsorship wasn't something that was done before that.
Oh, so really? Okay, so sponsorship is new, right? Okay.
Very, very new, and I'm the first to say, we're still figuring out how does that permeate into all the other parts of the business. We're still kind of figuring things out a little bit. We've got a very strong kind of suite of metrics that we track and whatnot, but I'm sure the likes of Citroen have been at it for a much longer period than us, and you've probably got it bedded in a little bit more than we do.
Yeah, well, I suppose for Citroen sponsorship, you could break it into a few different. There's media sponsorship, so we sponsored Traffic and Travel on Lyric FM and Marty in the Morning show. Then you have obviously we're motoring partner to Bloom, so for Bord Bia Bloom, so official motoring partner, which is it's bums on seats, is getting people to see the cars, to sit in the cars,
and
to tell a story, all of that, yeah. And then what you have is you'd have a lot of brand ambassadors. Maybe a lot of it would be sort of organised through local dealers, perhaps. They might sponsor a local footballer and put them in a car, give them a car or whatever. At sort of our brand level, we actually don't have any at a top level at the moment. You get requests in for people and you go, dude, who is that person? They're available for a car as well.
Yeah. So am I, by the way, Trevor.
No problem. Yeah.
We actually do a Star Trek report, and like that, some people that show up on it, they're not obvious, but it's just, we look at like media personalities and sporting personalities, and I think in football, like the likes of David Clifford, and that rate's quite high. But yeah, some of the ones that get mentions,
you wouldn't.
I wouldn't necessarily know them straight off the bat.
Yeah. I think thing about buying a new car, it's that purchase decision is so long. It could be 6 months, could be a year. On average, people will spend, say, 6 months trying to decide what they're going to buy, but they could be considering something for 3-4 years. So sponsorship for us, it's an opportunity for us to be relevant and constantly be there. So it's nearly like the always on thing is sort of a prerequisite for a brand, a motoring brand. So Traffic and Travel on Marty in the Morning does great for us, because 2 years of that, it's every single morning. And Bord Bia Bloom is brilliant because they actually then get to see the cars, and you don't have to travel to dealerships or whatever. So,
well, I was saying to you when we were chatting last week that I think a car purchase is like a B2B buying decision almost. It's you know, it's a consumer thing, but it's actually all the things you say, like that duration, the amount of time, the consideration set, and like all the B2B research. Like if you're not in that consideration set at the start, then you're not going to be there when they make the decision to buy, right? And so
and a car is such a badge, you know. I suppose for the drinks industry, it was always that over the shoulder moment when you're standing at the bar and what you order and what it says about you. But a car is doing that and broadcasting that the whole time, you know, be it sitting in your driveway or whenever you're driving it. So, you know, there'll be maybe 5 or 6 acceptable cars within a repertoire that this says the right thing about me. So it's about getting into that, you know, and that's where something like Bloom really helped us to tell a story about our brand. It's about getting yourself back into that consideration set at the right time. But, you know, we've got January, February, March where you need to sell sort of 50% of your volume for the whole year, or else you're just not going to hit your target for the whole year. Yeah, for that sort of Q1 January registrations. So, you know, you have that peak, and then you've got July, which is a sort of another smaller peak. You might do about 20% there. So you've 2 times that you need to have all your work done and be in that repertoire for those 2 buying periods.
So something like Bloom then works really well, I guess, in that kind of timing wise, because it's June. So it's probably people who are at Bloom are, you know, potentially people who are going to be buying the car coming up now, like just December or January time.
Exactly, yeah, and then you remember, I remember seeing that actually. Look, I'll check it out or whatever, and then getting them actually just to sit in the car, because we're all about comfort. Citroen's positioning is all around comfort, and that's been it's been a sort of USP for Citroen all the way along. It's always been known for comfort. So what I'm trying to do is bring that comfort, double down on comfort with everything. So you're going to see more of that coming. But getting the bums and seats is the important thing. There you go. Looks, you know.
To feel the comfort.
Feel the comfort. You can only describe it so far.
Just an interesting point on that. You talk about your kind of purchase journey. With us, it's very different in that it can be, whether it's fuel or it's home heating or whatever it might be, it's a very competitive market, and it can be just the price on the day. It can be any number of things. So sponsorship as one piece, what we're trying to do is just lift ourselves just above everybody else from that perspective, and kind of just rise above the noise of, it's not all about price, just do you remember seeing us somewhere. And look, we obviously brand track and all that sort of thing, and in the last round of that, we kind of saw that we have become in terms of people having purchased heating oil last, we were the highest proportion of people that have done that, and that's changed significantly over the last 3 years since we began the sponsorship journey. So it's starting to see that correlation as we grow.
That's interesting.
To kind of elevate us above the rest of the kind of fuel brands. And
it is a great way to kind of, I guess, differentiate, but you know what I mean, kind of, if you align to what you're trying to do, the things you're trying to communicate out, and then find the right sponsorships. And Ciara, you, I think, probably see a lot of that, of kind of how to make sure that the rights holders and the brand are coming together with kind of for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's the alignment piece. I thought of it, you know, when I moved to Bord Energy, it was almost that the theatre was almost like their personality. So with the likes of, you know, grudge purchase such as electricity and gas that you don't really think about, it's like, well, how do we have a nice, you know, element to us? And the 2 guys mentioned interesting things just in terms of like your portfolio of sponsorships, so that you're hitting certain demographics with certain sponsorships, and you're showing up. You know, the Diageo always talk about that black thread that runs through their sponsor. So how are you showing up, you know, consistently across different platforms, and what is that saying about you as a brand? Because it is a big spend, you know, in terms of marketing. We're finding, you know, the industry would tell us that they're spending about 25% of their marketing budgets on sponsorships.
On sponsorships, okay.
Yeah, and you know, different sponsorships will do different jobs, but they'll cost different amounts of money, you know. So if you're talking like your rights fee and your activation fee, you know, that's different. And one of the things you mentioned there is, you know, the name change. So a sponsorship can have real impact at a time of name change, you know. So we saw that with Aviva, with the stadium, you know, we saw that with 3 Arena, you know, just how quickly you can embed yourself within the psyche and the landscape.
Become part of the language of the area,
I don't know if it's true, but just a story I heard when O2 rebranded the Point to the O2. This goes way back, but they apparently got taxi drivers to, like, they incentivized them to say to people when they were dropping them there, people go, "Oh, we're going to the Point." "Oh, you mean the O2?"
Okay.
And I've no idea.
Is
if it's
that an
true,
urban?
but it's a dead
But even
story.
to
You
this
wouldn't
I do,
day,
yeah,
to
yeah.
this day, when you think of the Lewis still goes to the point.
Oh, you're
You
because
know,
it's the point.
so
yeah,
so there's certain ones you can never quite overcome, but yeah, so it just, and with the likes of Bord Bia, it's knowing at Bloom, it's knowing, well, this hits this demographic,
Yeah.
so it's predominantly an ABC One, there's a lovely mix of like age groups, there's a family element to it as well. So just something like that, having it within your portfolio. So you're like, well, this is our event that hits this demographic, and then we have this sponsorship over here that does this other job for us.
I said at the start I had misconceptions or different perceptions about Bord Bia Bloom. Like, I thought it was the Chelsea Flower Show. I've never been to the Chelsea Flower Show, but
I was
I
there
had in
this
my
year, it's
head
amazing,
it
yeah.
was like you would only go there if you were into gardening, right? And so I never went because I wasn't into gardening. And I was there this year and I was like, oh my God, there's so much to it. It's like a festival.
It's a festival,
of,
yeah.
There's food, there's,
It's an experience, and it's experiential, and the themes that it brings up. So it's like sustainability as a theme, and there's cooking, and there's entertainment, and there's kid zones, and there's just such different elements. It's a family day out. It's just a real high quality experience, I think.
I mean, did any of you have those similar perceptions of Bord Bia Bloom, or did you know what it was?
Like, what I love about it, the gardens, actually, you might think you're not interested in it, but actually when you start seeing the stories that are being told there and how those stories are then interpreted in a garden to tell that story is fascinating. So I'm always fascinated, actually, the people that just go to Bloom but actually wouldn't have been interested in the garden. A lot of people that I spoke to when I was there going, the gardens actually were one of their highlights. I think that came out in the research recently as well, that always scores really, really highly. Then, of course, look, there's the toys there, if you chainsaws, ride-on mowers, all of that stuff that you think you could easily leave there spending 10 grand. Not a bother.
But it's fascinating what it offers. And Trevor, had you been before? Or
No,
you guys
I
got
was
involved?
in the same boat as you, to be honest. And
Not my own.
we were in the same boat. We were originally talking to them about supplying HVO to the event. As you know, it's a large area. They've got to power it, so there's a lot of generators that run, that sort of thing. So we were helping to supply HVO, which is a low carbon diesel replacement. So Bloom were able to bring a 90% carbon reduction on their whole event just with the use of that product. So we were talking to them about that initially, and the more we got to know about it, the more we went, wow, this is a phenomenal event, and we really want to be a part of it. And the first thing we started talking to them about was the sustainability element, and found out about the sustainable living stage and what was going on there, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So last year was our first year at it, and it was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable from a business perspective as well. We obviously pushed very much the renewable side of the business. We're talking about solar and HVO as a product for general drivers, but even the audience we were talking to at the event, they're so kind of eco-conscious and sustainably minded, and we found even from a solar perspective, the conversations we were having were kind of they were above that research level even. So the leads you were generating through it were kind of very hot, warm leads coming through, and phenomenal response from the audience there. So absolutely core part of our mix going forward from now on.
Really, based on that, and it's really interesting. You went in with one idea. We'll provide the fuel and kind of be that partner, but actually you went much deeper. And now we're looking at what more can we do? How much bigger can we make this? How do we bring the cricket into it? How do we get people talking about sport and bringing local clubs in? So it's about that cross-pollination of sponsorships that you mentioned earlier. And then, Trevor, when you kind of first got engaged with Bloom, kind of how did it come about? Was it?
Yeah, so we were launching the EC4X, which basically, I think, to Trevor's point there about sustainability and everything, I think there's you could try to be perfect with everything. It's never going to be perfect. So I work for a car manufacturer, so we're one of the most guilty parties on the planet for what we do, but we're trying to be better. So the EC4X had 140 kilos of recycled materials in it. 70% of the power to manufacture it came from solar panels on the roof in the factory in Spain. So these were little gains or little bits of trying to be better. So again, we used Bloom to tell that story. So the garden that we had was a climate positive domestic urban front garden, which we put our tiny little Citroen into the garden. So it was like, how much do you actually need? And enough is enough. So at the time, we had just launched a Citroen Ollie, which was a concept car basically that had tyres that would go for 500,000 kilometres without needing to be changed.
Wow.
Developed that with Goodyear. There was basically everything was recyclable on the car. It was the big challenge for cars is everything's getting heavier, over 2 tons, and you don't need a vehicle of that size. So again, the garden was a downsized garden, an urban front garden, where actually even if you have a small space, you could make a difference. If you don't need to do big journeys and you're just going around urban little areas, maybe a little Citroen that costs €9,990 will do you. Or do you need to spend 30 grand on another car that's actually doing the same journeys? So for us, it helped us tell that story. Last year was around comfort, so it was a floating garden, so to the sort of the flying carpet effect that Citroens are known for. So it was bringing that message out, talking about comfort. We won gold again and best medium show garden.
Just saying.
No pressure. No pressure this year. On for the hat trick.
Any of the ambassadors?
No, surprisingly, no. They could have been there, but
yeah. Well, look, I'll drive next year. And
absolutely, yeah. Lammy would suit
looking
you.
forward to it. I don't know when we'll figure out when I pick up the keys. But
Yeah.
Ciara, like, one of the things the guys have talked about is kind of the right objectives, but also kind of then measuring that. I know that's something you probably work a lot with both brands and rights holders on. Like, it can be hard sometimes. Sponsorships can be a harder thing to measure. How are you kind of having those conversations with brands and rights holders around the measurement side of things? You were tuned into That's What I Call Marketing. I have seen firsthand the valuable interactions you can have with a wide and diverse customer base at Bord Bia Bloom. Get in touch with the team today to find out more about how you and your brand can get involved with Bord Bia Bloom at bordbiabloom.com/participate.
So in terms of measurement, it shows up at the beginning in terms of how you value, as your rights holder, how do you value, and as a potential brand, how would you evaluate an opportunity? So what you get typically is a list of potential rights you could have, and then you're wondering, is it worth this money? And is this so? That's the beginning of the puzzle that we would speak about, and we'd look at valuation through 3 lenses. Normally, we'd look at these are the line items that you have, and let's look at it through this lens, and that's the outputs, but still that's not measuring the outcomes. That's not measuring the impact that it has. So that's where the research comes in. That's in terms of, nationally representative consumer-facing research. Like, what's the awareness level like? Like, what has it done for your brand? It's all about kind of your awareness, your affinity. What is it doing in terms of driving consideration? So really it's so that you have those solid metrics to bring back, and we've gone from this to this because of this, and it's about having that like sponsorship specific research.
Right.
So your brand tracking will track how your brand is doing, but sometimes you can't attribute, well, what part of that do we think is because of this sponsorship? So Bord Bia themselves do a lot of research, in terms of, speaking to people who have attended the event. What's their recall like? How do they, remember certain brands? Did they purchase at the event? And it has quite high rates there. What was their average spend? Those kind of things.
And it's really interesting kind of to do it at the sponsorship level, or the portfolio of sponsorships, that you're kind of figuring out what impact they are.
And with who? Overall, who are you talking to?
Yeah.
So who are you talking to, and what sponsorships are doing what for what demographics? Yeah. So looking at, okay, we have these numbers of different sponsorships, and what are they doing across for consumers in general in terms of brand perception?
Yeah, and they have that ability to shift. I mean, to your point, Trevor, the comfort. You know what I mean? Like physically getting people sitting in. Going, that's a comfortable car.
I think what we did, and we sort of ramped it up even more last year, was we tried to integrate Bloom into everything that we were doing. So our car campaign. So the first year with the EC4X launch, again, we had specific Bloom advertising, and then that model advertising. Then last year, we sort of developed There's Comfort in Our Nature, was basically the campaign line. So again, trying to tie in nature back into comfort and bring that comfort message out using the Bloom property, you know. So we had outdoor specials, we had specific outdoor, a lot of video content that we recorded as well. So really integrating it into what you're doing around that time. It works for us, as you said earlier, Ciara, because it's June, so it's into a carbine period. But really maximising the sponsorship is the key for us anyway.
The activation piece as well.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
So we survey the industry annually. So, and at the beginning of kind of the start of this year, the ratios were roughly kind of €1 fee to 80 cent activation. But not all sponsorships need to be activated equally. If you have a naming rights sponsorship, while the price tag is quite high, the assumption is that that's going to do the heavy lifting for you. Just having that named venue should do the heavy lift. So you shouldn't necessarily need to activate it as heavily. But then if you look like your charity partnerships, in some cases that's €1 fee to €10 activation.
Right.
You know, so it's just, but the industry, and it had slightly dipped in the last year. The year before it was kind of €1 to 89 cent. So it's just for brands just to remember that, you know, we also have to put money behind activating this and making it work for us. And the ones that do best at Bord Bia Blooms are the ones that, you know, are the brands that recognise it's not just about showing up, it's about, you know, using this platform for us to make it work for us. It's about sweating it, you know.
And actually, we should, if those kind of, any of those reports are available, we can add them to the show notes so that people can download them. Right? Just, we'll do that because there's some interesting stats there. And I think those things help people who are maybe making the case for sponsorship. I mean, Trevor, you're saying that this is, you're reasonably new, it's your kind of second year or kind of going into it. And I'm sure you were in that position where you had to kind of make the case for this and for this being the right thing. How did you go about making the case? Like, you weren't just going, sounds nice.
No, I suppose at the time it was probably an easier sell than normal because we were new.
Right,
and we were kind of, all the talk was about how we're going to grow brand awareness. That was basically the whole conversation sitting around the boardroom table was, how do we grow awareness?
Okay, that's a great conversation.
Yeah, so it was a great starting point to be at, rather than sitting there sweating, trying to convince people that this is the way to go. I was fairly fortunate in that respect. And when it comes to the events, it's a much easier sell because we can start to put hard numbers around it. I don't know if it's the same for you, but for us, it's very much lead generation at the event.
Right,
it's a very core KPI that we have to focus on, that we need to hit certain milestones with. And they're very different, like you say. Bloom, we're focusing on a completely different set of objectives or a different approach to how we go about the ploughing.
Okay.
At Bloom, it's very much lead generation. We're trying to get people signed up for solar site visits, things like that. They're very hard metrics, hard numbers to follow. Whereas on the agri side with the ploughing, we were a bunch of different brands that farmers may have been using for the last 40 years. So it's very hard to shake. You're not dealing with emo anymore, you're dealing with Certa. And it was all about narrative change. So it was big, massive stands and big awareness, trying to make sure that everyone could see us. Whereas at Bloom, it's much more focused and tailored. So it's, sorry, that's gone off on a bit of a tangent.
No, but it's really great to have that kind of, like, it shows how the portfolio of your sponsorship has to do different things, but also the metrics are very different to those two different events that maybe on the outside looking in, people go, they're kind of similar, but they're not. And you can do very different things.
You've got people standing there talking. And then obviously it's totally different from the kind of sport cricket sponsorship side of things and how you're activating on that. So yeah, it's a mixture of a few different things, but very much from the event side, it's hard numbers. We're all about lead generation and getting people signed up. That's
funny with cars. Traditionally, we would all be about leads and feeding those leads into the local dealers. So any show that we would participate in would be all about that. But one thing that I found fascinating at Bloom was a consumer came up, chatting away to her, and she said, "Where are you from?" She said, "From Cork." So she was sitting in the car for ages, and I said, "Oh, well, look, I can feed you on down to our local dealer there." And she was like, no. She said, "If I walk into the local dealer, I know him so well that I can't walk out without buying the car." So it sort of just hit, that was the insight that actually an event like Bloom, with 100,000 people getting to see the cars, can go and do a little bit of their pre-qualification. And it's that sort of local insight that Irish people in a small town or even in cities, they will know who the dealer is, particularly in more rural areas, and they can't go in and walk out without buying the car.
So that's a barrier.
It's a barrier.
So it's overcoming a barrier.
So like events are key for us, and sort of events that don't have the dealers involved. Really, you know, so Bloom is perfect for that.
And I did just, you've mentioned the cricket a few times, and it's the women's cricket team. What I find fascinating and interesting about that is because, again, not brands might, or marketers might be listening to this going, oh, like I don't have a budget of a Citroen or a Certa. You know, they may feel like they're big budgets, but sponsorships, and even at Bloom, you can actually get in for, you know, reasonable amounts of money. It doesn't have to be the, you know, 100,000 or 1.5 million. Like, there are opportunities out there, which you've clearly found with cricket.
Yep, and it's about, in my opinion, smart activation. You can do so much more with a property that's not hotly contested. I mean, if you look at some other sports, they kind of sold almost every part of the sport away, and it's not the same. So we're kind of working in a more niche sport, but you've got green fields ahead of you. You can kind of really own the space and build it out. So I think it's about how you activate. You can activate smart, and not necessarily be breaking the bank.
I want to kind of talk a bit more about kind of the more general stuff that you're doing, and maybe looking a bit ahead to what's coming up. I'm sure we're all in the joyful world of planning for next year. And like, when you're thinking about that, how are you starting to think about maybe your mix going into next year? Like, you know, there's media inflation we need to think about. Like, what you spent last year is not going to get the same value next year probably. So how are you thinking about that, Trevor?
It's an interesting one for us that we started kind of trying to go bigger and more national and becoming more of that utility brand style approach. And after a couple of years of that, we're kind of going, actually, we need to bring that all the way back down to the local again. And how do we get very niche down to certain areas and catch certain pockets? So there's a bit of a shift in that respect. But our whole, and it's not media specific, but our kind of whole ethos is changing slightly in that, because I mentioned it's a very busy market, very busy space. We're trying to figure out now, how do we make experience beat the price? How do you make experience the first thing people care about? So right now we're really on that kind of digital transformation journey and trying to upend a very old school industry and figure out how do we make it, what's the plan for the next 2 years to actually make the experience of dealing with us better than anywhere else. So we're looking at all sorts of things, whether it's online and your kind of account process, or it's driving a car up to the pump and the car knows which pump you're at and you tap the center console to pay, that sort of thing. So it's just trying to make those little digital journey and customer experience pieces. That's the key focus, and that's where most of our investment is going for the next few years, in terms of just bringing experience to the fore rather than media specifically. Okay,
that's really interesting, because it's very much about that kind of how the consumer experience, which is a huge part. Again, it's a marketing debate all the time, like who owns the customer and who owns the customer experience, but it sits right within marketing. But then the product has to, and you've different parts of your product that then have to interact well with the consumer.
And one customer could be buying across multiple different parts of the business, and how do you link that journey so that they're buying here but getting the benefit over there? So it's that kind of network effect, and then how do we expand that out to one of the big things, obviously, especially on the fuel side, it's one, you're looking at the price on the totem, but what's nearest to me? How do you convince someone to just go that extra kilometre to your site rather than someone red or green or that sort of thing. Exactly. So
where do I not have to, at the cash register, like, remember my pump? That's because you're always like, it's number 4, and it's always the obscured one. You're like, it's
you can never see it.
The back of the, you know. So
well, we're all pay at pump, so you're in and out in a minute. I
was just thinking about that there when you were talking.
The whole journey is seamless. You're on the road again.
So we'll put also in the show notes Ciara's nearest Certa. She doesn't have to worry about that.
Squinting from the cash.
And Trevor, from your perspective, planning, looking at next year, what do you...
Look, we're heavily product-led, so next year we've 4 1/4 new model launches, the quarter being the Citroen Ami, that actually we've just launched now, but it's a little midi quadricycle, you know, so it's effectively a quarter of a car. But our complete range is being refreshed next year, so new C4, new C4X, the brand new C3, which would be the most affordable electric car. So we're pricing that the same as petrol car. So the petrol engine and electric would be the same. It's 23,400. January, yeah. So that's the, and then we have a C3 Aircross, which is the 7-seater version of that again, which would be the most affordable 7-seater.
Do you have a price point on that?
Not quite yet, but we'll talk later, Conor. So the bottom line is it's going to be very heavy investment led in that, you know, TV ads, big huge media spend. So there's a lot of hungry children next year for us. It's going to be huge. It's the biggest model refresh of Citroen in 15 years probably. Yeah.
Okay, busy
So
year.
busy year, yeah.
Busy
huge,
now, planning for it.
Yeah.
A lot going on.
A lot of change, yeah.
And then, Ciara, from the sponsorship landscape generally, kind of what are the things you guys in Onside are
so I
seeing,
suppose,
looking ahead
you
to?
know, this year, you know, it's the theme of our industry report and for the next few years is the big time. There's just a huge number of, you know, global events going to happen here in Ireland, you know, be it the Ryder Cup or, you know, the men's Euros 28. So and we're just becoming this international platform. So there's, you know, Irish brands that are global, and then there's global events coming to Ireland. So it's just navigating that with brands. How can you play a part in this? You know, where is there a slice of this for you? How do you start now? You know, the Olympics and the Paralympics, you know, finished in Paris. The next is a 4-year cycle. Next one is in LA. So
that's harder, yeah.
You know, and yet it might be ideal for someone who wants that US audience. You know, so that's what we're seeing. You know, in terms of trends and that, and just so sometimes it can become harder then for rights holders. And to your point then about local going down and local, actually there's sometimes more opportunities if you can show how sponsorship of your smaller asset can actually achieve more impact for a brand, you know, providing, you know, that the activation is put behind it as well. So yeah, it's just constantly evolving, constantly, you know, in terms of the mix and everything and what's coming up, constantly changing.
I think for me then it's where, you know, maybe homegrown events like a Bloom have that more flexibility for a brand to kind of show up in a different way, I think.
And in terms of wastage as well, you know, like if your market is predominantly Irish, if it is a certain cohort, you know, why would you invest in a property that potentially there's wastage? You know, it does really well somewhere else.
Yeah.
We've looked at a few things with you guys as well around the URC and a few options, and you're looking at that going, well, there's only X number of home games, but you have to buy the property internationally. So you're kind of going, what good does Certa showing in South Africa do to anybody?
No,
It's just to catch that little bit when it is happening here.
When it is here. I know. And they're right for somebody, because again, I worked where I was kind of looking over a couple of markets in Europe, and something like rugby, even the Six Nations, hit every single market. And I was like, that kind of seems like a no-brainer to do something around it, but you know, the guys in the States didn't understand it and what the Six Nations was. And I was like, we'll battle another thing. I did want to ask you just a bit about, I kind of touched it a little bit, but like technology and AI, and I'm spending a lot of time at the minute trying to understand the tools in AI, how it can be used for advertising. I don't know, Trevor, if you saw the AI generated car ad for, I can't remember which brand. Maybe it wasn't done by a brand. It was done like a speculative ad for Audi, maybe. And it was just interesting.
Stylistically, it was great.
Yeah.
Like, it had all the cues in there, I suppose. You know, it's beautifully shot, all of that. Like, so that is certainly a threat. I think the use of AI, we're seeing it in our cars now. So ChatGPT being integrated in, it's been used in the models to sort of make voice recognition work harder and better. So as far as the product, it'll help enhance our product, because the more you can get a robot to do while you focus on driving, obviously the better. But as far as from a marketing perspective, like, look, we don't create our own TVCs, we create everything else radio-wise, you know, so whether AI could come up with a decent radio script that has all of, you know, maybe a TV ad is easier to do because it's so visual. It's probably, but...
I was talking to somebody about the radio ads piece, and like you can go and you can get ChatGPT to write the script, you can get like 11 Labs to do the voiceover. Like we could do one now and have it in 5 minutes. Would it be any good? I don't know. But what you miss probably is with a great VO artist and producer, like let's take someone like Lockie Butler or someone like that, and you're in studio, and just that knowing look or glance or saying, can you just that one word that you said, you miss that. Well, currently you miss that with AI, but I think it's a really interesting thing because it does mean that you can actually, a radio ad can be done for free, or for maybe €11, and you'd have something that's okay. And a lot of advertising is only okay. You know, and so that's kind of the interesting debate, isn't it?
You could say maybe the local nuances into it, you know, that's where you can say that actually, well, AI wouldn't know what resonates with, you know, somebody that in a Certa garage right down in rural that is, you know, where they've been buying their oil all these years.
Exactly,
Well, that's what I was going to say. For you, kind of at a very local level.
Local knowledge is key. Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that point, it's probably it's a help for us on the client side, but it's probably more of a threat to the agencies that we work with in terms of where they're where we're getting our creative and whatnot from. But it's exactly that. You don't get to see the local knowledge and the nuance of the nickname that guy's been calling the person in the shop since he was 7 years old or whatever it might be. So it's, from our perspective, I don't think it's going to make any major changes from a media perspective. Where it is going to impact for us, and it's back to that experience piece. It's how do we get more predictive around people? When are you about to run out of your product? How quickly do you run out so we can predictively order in advance so that it arrives the day before you run out, that sort of thing.
Okay, so that's where it's going to
It's all about that, and trying to build efficiencies into it as well in terms of what are people, like you say, there's still a large part of the country that has to still burn fossil fuels, or still has to put petrol in a car, still has to use heating oil. There's 700,000 homes with oil burners still across the country. That's not going away overnight. So how do we make that more efficient? How do we make sure that they're kind of burning less but getting more, that sort of thing? And taking our customers down that renewables journey, and not just ourselves.
Well, listen, thank you so much for spending time today talking about generally kind of your marketing mix, the challenges you have, how you're using sponsorship in the mix, and how Bord Bia Bloom is part of that mix. And what I love is how it's different. You know what I mean? You're all doing different things. And when I was there last year, it was something very different, but it was the right fit. And it was, to your point, Ciara, what are the objectives? How are you going to measure it? And then how does something like Bord Bia Bloom fit into that, if it's the right thing for a brand?
You need to come down and get a sun hat from us next year.
Yeah, I will.
We're very old school on our activations. We like to give away tangible things for people.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love free stuff. Don't I, Trevor?
You'll be in a little Citroen.
I'm going to get a sun hat and a car.
Well, perfect combination.
Yeah, perfect. Well, if it's got a sunroof on it, even now.
There you go.
Well, listen, Trevor, Ciara and Trevor, thanks so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks for tuning in, and really appreciate our sponsors of today's episode, Bord Bia Bloom. Look, we've talked about it. It really does offer incredible, unique opportunity to connect with your audiences. It is an event, as we mentioned at the start, it's rooted in horticulture, sustainability, creativity and community. It is more than just a garden showcase, as I found out. There's so much more to it. It's such a platform where brands can truly grow and thrive. That wasn't a pun, but like it fits, doesn't it? So look, if you are a brand owner in an agency, check out bordbiabloom.ie/participate, and you'll be able to find out much more about Bord Bia Bloom and the opportunities for you and your brands for 2025. And I would say hurry up, because Bord Bia Bloom tends to get sold out pretty quickly from a brand perspective. So definitely check that out. So I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. It has been great to explore the role of sponsorships in the marketing mix. I really do love sponsorships, and I would love your thoughts on how sponsorships help you elevate your brand presence. So do leave a comment, and be sure to subscribe to That's What I Call Marketing for more insights and strategies from the world of marketing. If you have enjoyed today's episode, do share it. Send it to your family and friends, or maybe just your work colleagues, whatever you feel comfortable with. If you rate or review the episode, it'll take you about 4 seconds seconds, and it is a great way for other people to discover That's What I Call Marketing. So from me, your host, Conor Byrne, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, another new episode will be coming out next Tuesday. So thanks a million. Take care.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.